So before I became involved in this book project, I was far from an expert on Dooyeweerd, and I was and still am not a professional trained illustrator. Graphic design is something that I did and still do alongside my work as a biblical scholar, as Richard just mentioned. So when I first spoke to Maarten Verkerk about writing a new introduction to Dooyeweerd's thinking in February 2022, I did have my reservations. We did have Dooyeweerd's colossal new critique of theoretical thought on our bookshelf at home. And as a student in 2005, I had taken a course with Gerrit Glas, in which Dooyeweerd was one of the authors we discussed. But I fell more into the category of intended readers, at least I thought so, than intended authors of this book. So I asked Maarten what he and Gerrit expected from these illustrations, and he replied, with giving me only one guideline actually, that they should be timelessly beautiful. So that was my only guideline throughout this process. And not only did it set the bar sky high for me, but as a classicist, it also made me think of Plato. As according to Plato, timeless beauty belongs in the heavenly world of ideas. And the best mortals can do is to create something temporary and imperfect that refers to it. So, actually Dooyeweerd came to my rescue as he does not write about beauty as something heavenly or unattainable, but he emphasizes the moderation that must accompany beauty. I've included his own words here. He says, this aesthetic nuclear meaning cannot express itself in the modal structure of the aspect concerned without an economic retrocipation. And he points to the Meden Agan, the nothing in excess rule, as a structural principle that retains its unassailable modal validity even amid historical change. And on the other hand, in the third quote, Dooyeweerd emphasizes that the aesthetic law sphere is founded in the modal lingual sphere. In other words, without humanity's sense of symbolism and imagination, there would be no art. Well, in case this was all Greek to you, this jumble of Dooyeweerdian terminology immediately highlights, I think, the necessity of a new and accessible introduction. And his language also illustrates my struggle as an illustrator, because something like simplicity and imagination may be Dooyeweerd's ideal of beauty, but how do you translate this kind of complex language into simple and imaginative figures? So for me, this meant that the illustrations should be evocative with as little excess and distraction as possible. And of course, you can judge for yourself whether that mission has been successful at all. In any case, I sincerely hope and I wish that these figures will not limit you in your study of Dooyeweerd's philosophy, but that they will help you to unlock your own imagination for the multicolored reality in which we live. And that is a reality which, according to Dooyeweerd, is beyond beautiful words and figures, but has its greatest meaning and expressiveness in simply being. So I would like now to share some of the figures and the ideas behind it, or the development of them. And Richard can say when I should stop or bring it to a closure. First, Dooyeweerd's theory of modal aspects. I think this was the litmus test of this entire undertaking, as this theory was essential to Dooyeweerd precisely because it had to prevent reality from being reduced to a single fundamental concept or dominated by a single scientific discipline. Think, for example, of Marx's worldview dominated by economics. So Dooyeweerd himself indeed uses this prism image to illustrate how a single reality created as a whole can be studied from many different aspects. The single white light breaks down into a multitude of colorful aspects. And I adopted this element of multicolor from the prism by giving each of the 15 aspects a distinctive color. So here you can see in the next slide, 2 initial sketches depicting the 15 aspects, and the 3-dimensional figure on the left, the bottom left, with 15 faces, nicely illustrates that there are sides to the one reality, 15 sides. And the triangular shape was intended to express that the later aspects are founded on the earlier ones. However, these attempts did not make it into the book, as the pyramid is primarily associated with hierarchy, with higher and lower aspects. And that is precisely what Dooyeweerd himself wanted to avoid, so I've learned. Moreover, we were looking for a way to consider a specific object or thing in reality from different angles, from different aspects. So a three-dimensional figure did not suffice for that purpose. So eventually, the circular fan-shaped figure was born. And this fan can be used to represent the interaction between the various aspects with the anticipations and retrocipations, foundational and disclosing directions. And in its center, objects from reality can be placed with their own qualifying and foundational functions. And to show something of the sequentiality, the order, and the uniqueness of the first numerical aspects and the final faith aspect, there is a greater distance between these two at the top of the circle. So it's not a complete circle. Okay. Well, we also made some changes to the initial versions of the aspects themselves. They are all represented by a specific icon. And you can see the earliest version here in Dutch. Again, with colors that are a bit too vibrant on your screen, I'm afraid. Well, and those changes were partly due to the comments made by sounding board groups. So again, thank you very much for everyone who read and thought about the images and how they would be the most appropriate. For example, what changes did we make? We changed the moral aspect to include a third hand. So not only the thumbs up and thumbs down, like judging and like representing ethical choices, but also the supporting, caring hand at the bottom to illustrate that it's also about caring for each other. And the economic aspect, to name another example, was eventually linked less specifically to money and finance by turning it into a bar chart that outlines the developments instead of just money coins. And the final group of figures that presented some challenges. Oh, I think I go too fast through my slides. Yes. No. This should go the other way. Yeah. This one, yeah. Were those representing the so-called ground motives, as Dooyeweerd believed that their eras and cultures are characterized by one dominant idea. And apart from the Christian ground motive, Dooyeweerd taught that ground motives have internal contradictions. So question for me, how to sketch an illustration that is internally contradictory. And these were eventually my findings, my results. And I'm particularly pleased with the middle one about the humanistic ground motive, expressing nature and freedom in attention. So humanity tries to subdue nature and to control it, but by doing so, they lose their crown. So the middle figure is like the Statue of Liberty in New York, and it's the snake developing from the tree is grabbing the crown, so that humanity is no longer as free as they would like to be. So these are just some little illustrations of what I try to do and how I develop my figures, and I hope you enjoy them as you skip through the book.